Our panel includes Colleen O'Dea, who is a reporter and editor-at-large for NJ Spotlight, New Jersey Spotlight, which is an incredibly helpful, growing online resource for information about New Jersey policy as well as New Jersey politics. Michael Hill, who is a reporter with NJTV, and Diane Allen, who was a member of the New Jersey State Senate from 1994 to 2018, representing parts of Burlington County, and Bernard Kenny, who was a state senator from 1993 to 2008, representing parts of Hudson County. So again, thank you all for coming. Those of you who tried to find election returns on TV last night may have noticed there were some stations that weren't carrying the New Jersey Assembly races for some reason. But one that eventually was NJTV, was carrying it online, and then they put it on TV at 11 o'clock or so. And our two guests, Colleen O'Dea and Michael Hill, were prominently featured on those returns, giving the returns and analyzing them. And they were there on the TV screen when I went to sleep last night, and somehow they're here this morning.
Did we put you to sleep, John?
Yes. So again, thank you all for coming. I'm going to ask you each to just give some opening impressions of what you thought about the election and governing going forward and politics going forward, and then we'll get into a discussion of those comments. So Colleen, do you want to go first?
Sure. So, again, Mike, as John said, Michael and I spent a lot of time together last night, and here we are again. I think we kind of, in the newsroom at NJTV, which is where I was working out of, were surprised by a lot of these results. Going into the election, it had seemed that the Democrats were in a really good position to do something that doesn't usually happen in a midterm, which is pick up seats. Usually, just as happens at the federal level, the president's party usually loses seats in a midterm. The governor's party usually loses, or at least doesn't gain seats. Hasn't in, I think it's about 70 years in New Jersey. So the Democrats were really, they seemed to have momentum from last year's federal midterms. They seemed to have a lot of money. They actually did, they had a lot of money to spend, both the candidates and then these independent spending groups that spend money on various races. Pumped a lot of money, especially into South Jersey, into the 1st, 2nd, and 8th district races. The 1st and 2nd, which is Cape May, and that area is the 1st district, and the 2nd is Atlantic City and other surrounding areas in Atlantic County. The Democrats were in power and had to keep that. In the 8th district, they thought they were going to be really close. That's Burlington County and around there. They thought, this is going to be a lock. We'll be able to flip that seat. Well, they lost in the 1st. They are still officially trailing in the 2nd, although there are reports that there are mail-in ballots that could get the Democrats over the top and keep them in the Assembly, which would keep that a split district. And in the 8th, they just didn't pull it out. The Republicans won by a decent margin. So those were surprising. There was also this great discussion that in the 21st, which is the Assembly Republican leaders district, he was going to go down because you had Democrats on the left and these independent conservatives on the right squeezing him and his running mate, his Assembly member Nancy Munoz. That didn't happen. Although the Democrats are not conceding there yet, the Republicans have a pretty good margin. And then in the 25th, which really would normally seem like a stretch because it's been Republican for so long. I think the Watergate era maybe was the last time, although there may have been one state senator in between. Gordon McInnes, thank you. In the 80s? Late 80s?
93.
Oh. Okay. Right. Dorsey.
Yes.
That was the John Dorsey thing. Thank you. That's. Would you like to come up and speak? So that seemed to be a stretch, but again, the Democrats were, running hard, and they had this momentum from last year's win in the 11th congressional district. But, one of the takeaways I had from last night is that these congressional victories last year for the Democrats did not at all translate into victories in the Assembly.
Thanks, Colleen. My takeaway about last night is that I think that there are a lot of people who thought that because of the results of the congressional races last year, that there was this massive blue wave, and that the momentum, as Colleen said, would carry over. And I think that people miscalculated that. I think that the Republican brand may seem damaged in this state, may seem damaged outside this state, may seem damaged nationally. But I think that there are people in this state who almost a natural sense of order. So it seems that we need to check this. And I think that's kind of what happened in district after district last night, that while there's this great enthusiasm and more women are involved in the political process and on the ballot, and more Democrats are moving into traditionally Republican areas like the 21st district or the 25th district, or down in Burlington County in the 8th district, I think that there's almost a natural sense of, let's check this. And this is a state, for the last 12 years or so, you can see the registration among Democrats increasing, almost tripling what it was 12 years ago. And so you have more Democrats who are registered to vote in the state, and the number is increasing. But I don't know what, Colleen, I don't know what the turnout was last night. That may have been a factor as well. One of the other takeaways for me is that I noticed in District 8, which is Burlington County, and in District 11, which is Monmouth County, Hotelling and Downey's, the incumbents there, where someone made an issue of the Camden cartel and saying that the Camden cartel, anybody know what I'm talking about with the Camden cartel? Anybody know? You guys know? There's a South Jersey power broker, and I think that in some of these districts there may have been a check, even though the Democrats won in District 11. They didn't win by a great big margin as far as I can tell. And in the 8th district, the Republicans actually made an issue of, look, it may be fine for the Camden cartel and this South Jersey power broker to wield his influence here and in there, but not here. And I wonder if that was a factor. Colleen and I talked about this last night. And I'd be interesting to see how much of an influence that was in the 8th district and in the 11th district as well. But I think what happened last night seemed to be a natural order check on, hey folks, we're still here. You may have been expecting the white flag for us to surrender, but here's the red flag.
I think it was the people that determined who won. And that's because I look at the 1st district where, as has been said, everyone thought that the Democrats would take it. And the ads that were pushed against Mike Testa were inflammatory and negative and so over the top, and both parties do it, sadly. But they were crazy bad, and Mike Testa is somebody that the people down there know. And they sit back and say, well, wait a minute, that's not Mike. We know Mike. And then there's a backlash. I saw that a couple of times when I was running, and the ads were just ridiculous against me, and people just said, I've had enough. I'm going to vote for her anyway. And I think that a lot of that may have happened down there, and also may have happened in the 8th. The other thing, though, about the 8th, first of all, Gene Stanfield, who was the former sheriff in Burlington County, and whom everybody knows and loves in that area. And again, the ads were crazy against her, and I believe people sat back and took notice of that. But the other piece is that even with all the money that was spent, it's about 7-1 spent against the Republicans. They still pulled it out, and that's in both of those, in the 1st and in the 8th. I think when you see that they're able to pull that out under those circumstances, I truly believe it's because of the individual, that they were known, and that they were known to be good people and people that you could trust. And there was a little thing also, the woman who was running against Gene Stanfield, Gina LaPlaca, very nice person, but she got caught up in something where she had scabbed during, she worked for somebody, and she went against the union and crossed picket lines, and of course, running as a Democrat with union backing, when they discovered that was very tough for her, and the unions pulled their support of her. AFL-CIO pulled their support, CWA pulled their support, and I bet that also played a role. And there were, the other thing that I found very interesting as a takeaway is the people who were running kind of on a third line. There was a lot of thought that would make a difference in the 8th, and I guess in the 21st as well. And it didn't, and that's a big surprise.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here. I want to give credit to the Republicans for their successes last night. In the 1st District, they took back the legislative delegation. In the 8th, they held on, and in the 21st, they held on. So the operative word there is held on. I don't, New Jersey's a blue state. It's getting bluer. You have to remember in each of the 3 districts we're talking about, they're Republican strongholds, traditionally. And the Democrats are playing there. And they're playing there strongly. And that the fact that we're talking about that the Democrats didn't win, they almost won in all 3. I give credit to Republicans for prevailing, but the factors that allowed for the Republicans to win, whether the strength of the Democrats don't come to bear in a low turnout election. So the playing field is leveled, made more even when a lot of people aren't coming out. Off-year assembly elections where there's no senator on the ballot, state senator, or higher office, that's about as low turnout as you get. So that the Democrats competed in all these places down to the wire is a testament to how blue the state is. So it's like if you go into the most difficult terrain, that there is politically, and you compete, that's a sign that the Democrats are strong. Not that the people are making a correction. I understand that idea, but I don't think that's what happened. It's just that the 3 factors that the Democrats have, money, 1 million more Democrats in this state than Republicans, and the Donald Trump phenomenon. They don't manifest themselves effectively when the turnout is so low in an off-year election when only the assembly's at the top of the ticket. Now, that takes nothing away from the fact that the Republicans won these races. Not to have done so would have been devastating to the Republican Party. If they don't get the legislative delegation in Cape May County, which is historically Republican, if John Bramnick doesn't hold on as the leader of the assembly for the Republicans, that's disastrous for them. And they survived, and I give them credit for that. I'm not taking anything away from it, but I wouldn't read too much into it, other than the fact that there's strong organizations in those counties for the Republicans, and historically, and they won the elections. One point I do want to make about the 1st District, and I don't know a lot about these districts around the state. I was in the legislature for a while, but in anticipation of today, I studied a little bit on it. And in the 1st District was kind of weird because you had the Democrats running against the governor, Governor Murphy. They're running against the governor. And they're running to Trump, in a manner of speaking. So this is an odd thing where the Democratic candidates in the district are running away from a Democratic governor and to a Republican president. Now, if you're a voter in that district and you have a bona fide Republican in Mike Testa who's running for, well, why would you vote for the Democrat if you can have the real thing in the Republican? So it was an odd strategy, to set yourself against the Democrats, run as a Democrat, and expect people to vote for you, including Democrats. vote for you when you're running against the Democrats. So, and the Republicans and others down there, well, let's vote for the Republican. So, the message there for me, and I've seen this in my political life, is, if you break protocol, be careful. If you break protocol, be careful. If you run against your own party, there's going to be a consequence 9 times out of 10. And that's what they did down in LD1. Van Drew, Congressman Van Drew, last week or two, voted against impeachment. He has his reasons for it. But is there a Democrat in that legislative district that didn't take note of that? And it's called the Van Drew team. So, that was interesting to me. And the outcome that Mike Testa won, to me, was sort of, what's the phrase? Unintended consequences came to fruition because of the strategies that were employed by the Democrats.
I only heard the phrase, the Murphy midterms in the last week. I don't know if other people were saying it before, but there was this notion around that, or toward the end of the campaign, that in one way or another, this was going to be a referendum on public satisfaction or dissatisfaction with Governor Murphy. And I think those of us who were here then remember when Governor Florio, the midterms after Governor Florio had been elected, when there was a massive turnover of Democrats being defeated by Republicans, and there was opposition based on a platform of opposing the tax increases and the gun control regulations that Governor Florio had put in. I wonder what you all saw in this race of, is there anything to pull out of this to say, yes, this is a referendum on Governor Murphy in one way or another, and were there specific issues of the Murphy administration that candidates were calling on, or is just a general sort of liberal versus conservative kind of thinking? Diane?
Certainly Murphy was saying that he thought this would probably be a bit of a referendum, and said that he was looking forward to it. He liked the way things were going. Probably doesn't feel that way today. But I didn't see it so much as a referendum, really. It's the assembly races on down, and I think it becomes much more local when people are going to vote in these kinds of races. You don't have the pressure of Trump or things hanging over. I mean, some may disagree with me, but perhaps in the first district, Bernie, perhaps in the first district, the whole Trump thing played out, which may cause havoc for Congressman Van Drew when he runs again. But I think people were looking much more locally. To me, I've talked with the folks in the 8th District, the Republicans in the 8th District, and they felt also that the tax piece did play a role. And so that would have been obviously a negative for Murphy. And Murphy's quote about, the whole thing about taxes, I can't quote it exactly, maybe somebody can for me, that,
The gist of it was, if taxes are the issue you vote on, then New Jersey might not be the state for you to live in.
Yeah. I mean, that was really a questionable comment, I think, and there were people who were repeating that in the 8th District. So in that sense, maybe it was a little bit of a referendum on Murphy, but in general, I think not.
Yeah, I think it depended, as Senator Allen said, on the district. I know that there are some districts where Republican strongholds typically, where they were focused, and they didn't need to be probably, but on things like the Immigrant Trust Directive that the Attorney General has put in place, which essentially says to police, you can't just help out ICE unless there's an actual warrant for a person, to try to stem some of this, what they see as ICE going after and targeting immigrants. It was called the sanctuary state back in 2017 when Murphy was running. Now I think we're calling it being a welcoming state, because sanctuary is not such a good name, but so immigration, and I think immigration was an issue in the first district as well, as it's been a national issue for some people, because Cape May has sued the state over this directive, and so I think that played in there. But in terms of people running pro-Murphy, I mean, certainly down in South Jersey, they were not going to do that because it wasn't going to play well. And in North Jersey, it played, but those again were districts where it didn't matter. Those were Democratic districts where the party's going to win anyway. So I don't know how much of a factor, Murphy really was. He didn't get out and start campaigning for candidates until last Friday. And now there's a lot of talk, he had he visited 60 locations. Well, in one weekend, well, where were you before then? He wasn't doing TV ads with anyone. So I think that whole Murphy midterm is a little questionable.
I agree.
Also, apparently, when he was making these stops, people neglected to inform the candidates that he was coming. Nobody knew where it was going to be, so there was a lot of disconnect there, even when it started.
One aspect of the race which I need to mention is the Eagleton Institute factor. We had two candidates that I know of in the state who were Eagleton alums who both won. One was Ryan Peters in the 8th District, who had been an Eagleton graduate fellow here in the class of 2012. And the other was Jeff Martin, who had been an Eagleton fellow in 2007, I think, and was elected mayor of Hamilton last night. As far as I know, there were no Eagleton alums who lost. So those of you who are undergraduates wondering where to go to graduate school. And I want to mention two other races we haven't talked about outside New Jersey, or three. New York City adopted instant runoff voting yesterday, so that you can vote in the future in New York's elections by putting your preferences of your first choice, your second choice, and so forth, and not worry that you're hurting the candidate you might settle for. And as you've all probably heard, the state of Virginia, both houses of the legislature are changing from being narrowly Republican to being narrowly Democratic. And the governor's race in Kentucky appears to be a victory for the Democrats, defeating the incumbent Republican. So there's an interpretation you could make from these returns, and one of the problems with election returns in general, but particularly in an off year, is you can overinterpret them. And because somebody won by 600 votes, say that means Trump's no longer viable, or Trump's a saint, or whatever. But whether there is some breaking of the notion that all politics has become national, that the idea that it used to be more often that a state could be, like New Jersey, could be very generally Democratic, but still elect a governor pretty much every other time we elect a governor who is a Republican. And that's gotten rarer and rarer in the country. But it seems like that's what happened in Kentucky, where people who liked Donald Trump voted for the Democrat for governor. And that's to some extent what happened in the assembly races in New Jersey, where people where the trends seemed to be that the population was growing more Democratic, in fact, the Republican candidates prevailed in some of those.
I think, political look-backs remind me of like sports commentators. It's a great job, being a sports commentator. You talk all week about who's going to win. I know where this is going. You talk about all week who's going to win the game, who's going to win the World Series. The Astros are going to win it, and then the Washington wins the World Series, and then they tell you the next day why the team won. That's a lot like politics. I mean, after the fact, the experts tell you why. Whoever won.
And why it was inevitable.
And why it all makes sense, why it all makes sense, that repudiating all the commentary beforehand. And that's like politics. So in Kentucky, the Republican governor was vastly unpopular. His own party didn't like him. He did a lot of things that really annoyed a lot of people, and to the extent that it permeated the public consciousness of the people of Kentucky. And so they repudiated him. And that's why he had a problem. More telling is Virginia, where for the first time in a quarter of a century, the Democrats control both houses of the legislature. And Virginia, which was a red state, then became purple, is now blue. And that's very significant because the cultural trends in the United States are becoming more and more, for lack of a better word, democratic. This is happening in places such as Texas, and it's has to do with race. It has to do with ethnicity. It has to do with economics. It has to do with the diminishing white, the white voter. In 2000, white people were 76% or 78% of the vote in the United States of America. Now they're down to 62%, just in 20 years. And by 50, it's going to be under 50%. I mean, that's the reality of what's happening with our politics, is race. I mean, there's no question in my mind about it. It's all race-driven, largely race-driven. Getting back to the idea of Governor Murphy being his role in this election, I don't think he was a major factor one way or the other. I was in the legislature in 1991 in New Jersey when the Democrats got wiped out under Governor Florio, because he was the issue in that election. And the Democrats lost control of the legislature, and a man named Dick Coffey, who was the chairman of the Democratic Party at that time, and I was an assemblyman, said to me, or to us, that it'll take 10 years for the Democrats to come back from this landslide. And it did take 10 years. That's when the governor is the focal point of an election, when it's about him or her. That certainly wasn't the case yesterday. And I want to, restate, we're talking about an election where the assembly only is on the ticket, on the ballot, and a fairly low-key affair. And I think most of the races were determined by local politics and personalities and some issues. I don't think it was a dramatic statement one way or another about the governor.
I'd like to say something about the Virginia race. There were a lot of Republican women who were putting money into the Democratic women and others who were running in Virginia, because Virginia is kind of this last bastion, this last holdout state to get the ERA passed. And if Virginia would vote for it, which they tried to get through a couple of times recently, and the Republicans, for reasons I don't understand, decided not to vote for the ERA. We may all have to use the same bathroom, so. But now that the Democrats are in control, there's a really good chance that the Equal Rights Amendment will go through there, and then there is work afoot in Washington to then allow us to have that go through. And Alice Paul, God bless Alice Paul, who wrote the Equal Rights Amendment many, many years ago, will finally get her due, and hopefully we will get that amendment. So that's a huge win for women, having the Democrats take over there. And it looks like we may have at least one more woman in the Assembly, just one more, but that's something. Center for the American Women in Politics has, follows this so closely with great thanks to them. But it looks like there were 60 women who were running. These are their numbers, and while a lot of races haven't been officially called, I'm doing the official calling here. Looks like 60 were running, and of those 60, 25 were incumbents. Looks like they're staying in, and there should be the one addition of Jean Stanfield in the 8th District. It's sad when we only add one at a time. We've been rather static for quite some time. But when I started in government 25 years ago in the legislature, I think there were 12 or 13 of us. Maybe that's a max. I was only the 9th woman in the history of New Jersey to be sworn into the Senate. So times have changed, and thankfully we have made some headway there. I'd just like to see a few more of those 60 winning.
I want to ask you all what you think the implications, if any, from the election results are for governing in New Jersey over the next 2 years. The lead characters stay the same of the governor, the Senate president, the assembly majority and minority officers. Do you see greater cooperation or greater disharmony or
I think that, if anything, the loss of those first district seats, and again, the second district is in question, but if the Dems hold that, that keeps some Dem power there. But certainly if they lose those seats, that really kind of diminishes this South Jersey voting bloc, which, again, that so far unnamed power broker who we were talking about seems to have a lot of interest in. Said power broker's PAC, by the way, spent just in those three, the first, the second, and the eighth, by my count, and this is just the numbers we know, because there still probably was more money spent over the weekend that we haven't seen, but spent about 1.3 million in just those three districts alone, and certainly without a return in the first and the eighth. So we still have this question of you've got a very strong Senate president who's a Democrat and who does not seem to get along very well with the governor, who is also a Democrat. So I don't know that there wasn't so much of a shift that I think things are going to change very much. There's a lot of stuff is getting done because it's not controversial. But when you get to things that are somewhat controversial, these guys have not had a great track record of getting along, and I don't know that that's going to change.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think it really depends on the relationship among the South Jersey power broker, the governor, and the Senate president, because there's just something there. As often as it has been denied that, everything's great. Oh, no, there's nothing on. Clearly, I mean, clearly there is something there. And it gets in the way. Whatever it is, whether it's personal, whether it's professional, whether it's political, whatever, something is there that is standing in the way of getting things done in the legislature and getting bills signed. And as much as they want to deny it, it's there, and everybody can see it.
For generations, that people have always said New Jersey has either the most powerful governor in the country by constitutional authority or one of the most powerful. And nobody that I heard ever said that about having one of the most powerful Senate presidents in the country until recently. And I wonder, for the two of you who are in the Senate, whether what's going on now, the relationship of the Senate president and the governor, how different that is from your experiences, whether there anything similar?
Well, the Senate has always stood up for itself and expected and expects the respect of the executive branch. And when that is not forthcoming, the executive branch feels it. And, they let them know. So, we certainly saw it when Don DeFrancesco was in the Senate, and he stood his ground. And we certainly see it with Steve Sweeney standing his ground. And I think many senators, frankly, of both parties feel that he stands up for the legislature. And they like that. They think that that's right. And because Governor Murphy did not come through the legislature, he didn't have, maybe now a little bit does have, a sense of how that works. I don't know how he feels about the legislature or Senator Sweeney, but I think that he's looking to. Not specifically. I've not discussed it with him, but it seems like he's wanting to work a little more closely with Senator Sweeney, which is a wise thing to do, and then perhaps they'll get some of their things done.
When one political party enjoys prolonged success, as the Democrats have had in the legislature, I think it's been like 15 years or 16 years.
But who's counting?
Yeah, that the Democrats have controlled both houses of the legislature in New Jersey. When that happens, regardless of the party, or the state for that matter, competition develops within that party, intramural competition as opposed to against the other party. So that's a natural thing that happens. So the Democrats have been in control for a long time. So things happen when you're in control for a long time. An embarrassment of riches, and you have everything, and you forget about your opposition. So that's not unusual, and the Democrats are experiencing that, and have for the last number of years. I'm hopeful that the governor and the Senate president will come together, in the next month or two, to reassess and reset their relationship, going forward into these next 2 years. And perhaps, the results yesterday may contribute to that. You can lose it all if you don't start, working together cooperatively for the state of New Jersey and for those things that are necessary. So I'm somewhat hopeful that there will be some type of reconciliation, and that the Democrats will start working together instead of against each other.
I'm curious, may I just play the reporter role?
Yeah.
How do you foresee that happening? Because there are some really thorny issues, and the biggest one is the tax incentive issue. You have this South Jersey power broker who sued this administration and obviously lost, and you have this major issue there, and then you have what appears someone in the executive branch who makes a decision to carve out money for cancer treatment and so forth in South Jersey, and some people see it and say, it looks, it looks a little petty to do that, and you have the person in the middle of this is the Senate president who's going to say, okay, budget director, treasurer, what happened here? I can't get a meeting with you, I can't get a reasonable explanation about what's going on. So it perhaps you're right. Maybe somebody will have to step in, and there'll have to be some reconciliation and look at the facts and results of yesterday. But I don't know how this is going to be resolved.
Yeah, well, neither do I. but I think there are forces at work that are going to bring them together. And the sobering reality in politics, as in life, is you only do at the end of the day what you must do to survive. That's the thing. That's the thing that motivates people. Right? That's what motivates them. So at some point in time, the principals here will see that it's in their mutual self-interest to work together.
Let me just say, you bring up the fact that the governor withheld money to Cooper Hospital, to the MD Anderson Cancer Treatment Center of Cooper Hospital. And that was really a boneheaded thing to do. Because in South Jersey, everybody knows that that is a top-notch place to go. They know that when you start cutting money, that means you're cutting treatments. That means people aren't going to get what they need, what they must have. And then the governor gets that hung on him, and rightfully so. And the folks down in the Camden area, whether we're talking about power brokers or legislators or people on the street, were pretty unhappy about it, and for a very good reason. I was very unhappy about it, and I'm not a player in all of that. And I think that goes back to the fact that the governor just doesn't have his finger on the pulse of how things work yet. And once he finally gets all of that, maybe something will happen, but I don't think he does yet.
And I think, too, that even though he's a member of the Democratic Party, is that part of what has happened the last 2 years, and again, I don't know how this is, maybe survival is the motivator. I think over the last couple of years, because he has been an outsider to state politics to a certain extent, is that you've had people who are in the legislature who are so in tune and entrenched in state politics, looked at this as an opportunity. We need to school him. He needs to know how New Jersey politics work. I could be wrong, maybe. I see it as that. We need to teach him a lesson.
I think I'm going to open this to questions, first from students, and we have a microphone that Ben will carry. Any students in the room want to have a question? Want to know who the mystery power broker is?
I'm not going to name him.
Okay.
When you were saying he, you didn't say who. I was wondering who you were referring to, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I was.
All right, well, let's open to non-students or former students.
Just a very quick announcement before we go ahead. We are live streaming this on Facebook, so just keep that in mind. And I'll be walking around the microphone, so if you do get the microphone, please state your name, where you're from, and keep it brief so we can get as many questions as we possibly
Let's go
can today.
to Debbie, the director of this aforementioned Center on American Women and Politics. And
Hi. So one thing I just wanted to add is that one of the victories for women in this cycle is that because the House of Delegates in Virginia has flipped from red to blue, it is very likely that we will see a woman speaker there. So that's another added victory. I just wanted to ask on this issue of the relationship between the legislature and the governor, how much geography has to play into this? Because the governor's office is now a couple of blocks away from the State House, there is very little opportunity for informal interaction between the executive and the legislature. And I'm just wondering how you think that plays into this ongoing tension, that there's not that sort of walk down the hall, pop your head in, and talk to someone in the front office or talk to the governor or the treasurer. They're all gone. So I'm just curious what your thoughts on that.
let me just explain, the State House in Trenton is undergoing a massive and much-needed renovation. So what Debbie's alluding to is before the renovation started, and presumably once it's finished, people could walk up and down the hall and run into each other from the governor's office or the treasurer's office or the legislature. And for the period of this construction, which has been 2 years and seems likely to be several years more, you can't do that. So I don't know what your thoughts are.
I don't think that's the cause of the troubles.
No, but it doesn't
Yeah.
contribute to it.
I don't think so.
Well, I think one thing that does, though, is that, the governor made 60 stops or more, but they were all above 195. And there's a whole nother part of the state, and that's where the problems come in with the Democratic issues. There's the South Jersey Democrats, who are in fact more conservative, and the North Jersey Democrats, and there isn't a coming together. And the Republican Party in South Jersey and the Democrats in South Jersey tended to think more alike than the Democrats in North Jersey. So there continues to be that issue. I mean, in the first district, I don't think the governor ever went to the first district. And you would have thought that that was an area that, because it was so important, or the 8th district. I don't believe he ever went to the 8th district.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I think his wife may have gone there one time for a moment and a half, but it just goes to show that if you're not looking at the state as a whole, if you're only looking at a piece of it, it's going to come back and get you.
And I think, too, that I had an interview with a state lawmaker and a leader in the assembly from North Jersey, and this was in 2018, maybe 2017. And there was some thorny issue, the dispute between the Democrats, not so much the Republicans, but the Democrats. And when my photographer left and the camera was off and the camera was gone and the microphone and the lights too, the assembly member leaned forward and said, "Michael, we know what this is all about. Those Confederates in the southern part of the state just voted." And I mean, here we are in New Jersey, somebody called their fellow lawmakers in New Jersey, below Trenton, Confederates. I'm like, okay, that says a lot about mentality. The blue and the gray, here we go.
You know, we are, part of South Jersey is below the Mason-Dixon line.
Yes,
so-
it is, absolutely. Yeah, if you look at Cape May County, I had to go down there for an NJTV town hall meeting, and I looked at the map, the geography, and literally, Cape May and Wildwood are as far south. They actually go into the District of Columbia in terms of being far south.
I'm sorry, if I'm going out of turn. New Jersey is the third smallest state. It has 9 million people. It's the most densely populated state in the country. It is also the most ethnically and racially diverse state in the country. So this creates for many political tensions in this state historically. Now, it evolves over time, what the issues are. But, none of this is surprising, that there's conflict and stress between factions in the state or within the party or between the two parties or between the governor and the legislative branch. This just didn't happen, in the last 2 years. It has been going on, for decades because of the nature of the state of New Jersey, where home rule is very, very powerful. Why is home rule so strong in New Jersey? You know what home rule is? That every locality wants to control its destiny, despite the fact that they're only a mile or two apart in a state of this size. I come from Hudson County. We have 12 municipalities. You can go literally a half a mile and be in a totally different world in Hudson County. So why is home rule so strong in New Jersey? Because the more densely populated a place is, and the more diverse it is, the more possessive are people of their political integrity, of their locale. And that's bred into the culture of this state. I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's very, very different, here than, say, in a state like, Nebraska.
Texas.
Or Texas, or wherever you want to go. New Jersey's rather very intense in that regard. So people are very protective of their communities, their counties, their politics, their control, and that is what makes for these tensions between and among various political factions in the state. It's a very complex state, intense state, and that's why home rule in New Jersey is probably the strongest of any state in the country. So these things that we're talking about have been going on certainly as long as I've been involved in politics, which is almost 40 years, in the state. I mean, it's not any different. The personalities change, the people change, but the dynamics are the same. Between and among political parties and between the North Jersey and South Jersey, the Jersey Shore and the Northwest and Sussex. It's always been pretty much, it evolves, but it's always, you could come back 50 years from now and we could have the same discussion. Believe me, the exact same discussion.
Same unnamed power broker will still be in effect?
No, someone else in his place.
One of the people, if you're watching online, you can send in questions, and one of the questions that was sent in by is, I think, a rhetorical question. Is it in the best interest of New Jersey for Murphy and Sweeney to make nice? I guess we'd all say that would be in the good interest of the state if it's whether or not it's likely. Questions, other questions? Yes, Jeff. And please identify who you are and where you're from.
Hi, Jeff Davis. I'm from Marlborough. Question about the local economies. Generally speaking, the economy is a big influence in voting, but I would call it more of a negative influence. When it's bad, it seems to be stronger. Was there any impact from the local economies on the election outcome, or were other issues driving it more? Thank you.
Well, I mentioned that I thought that the tax issue
Yeah.
was something that was at play in the 8th, and my guess is that it was at play in other districts as well. You know, we've seen, I believe I have seen the economy have its problems ever since we put in the first McGreevy millionaires tax, and we had all of those people leave the state and take all of their money with them. And then when Mr. Tepper left and took 5% of the taxes that he used to give, 5% of the entire taxes that we collected in New Jersey came from him, and he said, "I've had enough," and changed his domicile to Florida. Those are the kinds of things that have hit us and continue to hit us. And there are people in the legislature, in my estimation, who just don't pay attention to that, who don't look beyond their noses. And I think it will continue to see New Jersey on a downward spiral economically until we come to grips with the whole tax issue.
I think where it came in related to that is in the question of school aid, which we still
Yep.
struggle with figuring out all these many years after the first court case, back in the 60s.
70s.
So there's a new school formula that went in place, and there were cuts, especially to wealthy districts. Now, you know, if you believe that you know, we should help the poorer districts, and that if you're a wealthier district, you should be able to afford it, then that was okay. But that was used as an issue in many races to say, you know, Governor Murphy cut school aid, and when there's a school aid cut, pretty much your taxes go up. And so that was definitely an issue.
You have your hand up? No. There, over on that side.
Thank you. Jeff Laurenti from Trenton. This has been a very rich discussion. I've been surprised that there has been no mention yet of the most exhilarating result from yesterday's vote, which was Jersey City voters' rejection of Airbnb's effort to snow them into accepting a laissez-faire approach. The other thing I would like to raise as a question to the panel is the impact of the vote by mail legislation of the past few years, in which anybody who had voted by mail or absentee before 2017, unless they specifically opted out, automatically get a mail-in ballot. Now, in Mercer County, as of 2 weeks ago, according to our county clerk, she had sent out 25,000 ballots and had, at that point, over 8,000 returned. It will have been much higher by last night, but even at that point, it was a 33% participation rate. And in terms of folks dragging themselves to the polls for a know-nothing or a low-value state assembly or freeholder election, we had like 20% average. What do you all think is the impact of people being able to vote in the leisure of their own homes, and how does that change politics and campaigning going forward when more and more folks will be voting that way?
And let me just put some numbers on the table before you answer. So in 2015, there were 144,000 people voting by mail. So it went from 144,000 to 183,000 in 2017, and the estimates for yesterday were at least 244,000. So it's more than double, or about doubled in 4 years. So.
I think it might mean that the governor can't wait until the Friday before the election to go out and campaign for candidates. Just saying.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I just want to give kind of a personal statement to this, answer to this as well, which is that it's a lot harder for us to do our jobs now with vote by mail. So that the second district race, for instance, is the perfect example. When we were on air last night and we were talking about the Democrats probably losing that, we were looking at AP results, which gave us no indication of vote by mail. Afterwards, I went to the Atlantic County Clerk's website, which is where the results are posted, and found that in fact none of the vote by mail ballots were included. So that's where that comes in. Vote by anybody who postmarked their ballot yesterday, put it in the mail yesterday, can still have it counted up till tomorrow. So it lengthens the amount of time that we have for figuring out who won. Another byproduct of that is the folks who didn't know they were going to get a vote by mail ballot automatically, got it, didn't want to use it, showed up at the polls, and then had to vote provisionally. So if you go to the polls and they see that you got a vote by mail ballot, whether you turned it in or not, maybe you turned it in and forgot you did, but whether you turned it in or not, you can only vote by a provisional ballot, and then the county has to check to make sure you didn't vote twice. That further complicates the counting. What we saw in, and this is Michael's colleague, Brianna Venozzi, had done an Oprah request, an open public records request. More than 600,000, or roughly 600,000 vote by mails had been sent out, which is huge. And as John said, there were about 240,000 returned so far, more to come. It's definitely changing.
It's a higher turnout rate than people went to the polls.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely changing the way that we vote, and I can only see it continuing to increase.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm just going to say, it ultimately will change the way money is spent in political races as well, because right now, the common concept is you wait until the last couple of days and you put $1 million against somebody and then you win. But if all of the people have voted already, it's not going to make any difference, you know? So I assume all of that will ultimately change.
Jeff Laurenti made a point about the Airbnb election in Jersey City. In all seriousness, that was an extraordinary election. Tens of $millions was spent on a question, unprecedented because of its importance as a precedent for the country. And the basic issue was the city of Jersey City, Mayor Fulop, wanted to have the city have power to regulate this Airbnb industry. And the Airbnb industry did not want it to be regulated. And then the issue being, if you own a building and have apartments in that building, you could rent them out on a short-term basis outside of the scope of regulation, be it rent control or affordable housing or whatever it might be at market rate. So the city wanted to be able to have some ability to regulate, not only for that purpose, but also for quality of life issues and so on. So this became a huge battleground in that election. And yesterday, the yes vote, which was to regulate, prevailed. It was a major victory regardless of how you may feel about the issue. And it's a complex issue. It's very complex. But Mayor Fulop prevailed. And so the city of Jersey City does have will have the authority to continue to regulate the Airbnbs in Jersey City. And it's a nationwide issue. So that was a very significant election, actually. And the public, the people of Jersey City were inundated with, all sorts of millions and millions of dollars worth of campaign information, and came to this decision. So it was pretty remarkable, and Mayor Fulop should be commended as a political leader for leading that fight. Whether you oppose or support that question, he stepped up as the mayor, and he prevailed.
And it was a good day for former Governor Brendan Byrne, who said he wanted to be buried in Jersey City to stay active in politics. Diane, were you about to say something? No, okay. Other questions? There's over there, three people over there.
Joel Reese from Somerset County, Franklin Township. We talked about South Jersey all day, and Norcross and all the other villains down there. But who? Who? Yeah. So, but we didn't talk about our backyard. In Somerset County, historically, turned blue last night. It's never been blue. I don't know. In history, we have Russo won the sheriff, and Melanie Morano, a woman. Well, she ran against Pat Walsh, and she won. There's only about 300 votes there, but it could turn, but I don't think so, because it seems like the male ballots in Somerset County were more Democratic slanted than Republican from the early reports I got. But that's a big one. That changed that county. That was always a red county.
Yep.
Yep.
Well,
And that's why Governor Murphy was there last night delivering remarks
Right.
because that was kind of going to be he wanted a showcase. He wanted a place where Democrats were winning, so.
He did campaign on.
Yes.
Gary Maturin, East Brunswick. I want to thank everybody on the panel. Governor Murphy is the issue, and I'll tell you why he's the issue. 50 years ago, I helped elect as a captain in the East Bronx, a block captain, John Bill Lindsay, as the Republican Liberal Mayor of the city of New York. I worked 7 days a week to elect him to decimate the Tammany Hall machine. Most young people here do not know that the Middlesex County Democratic Organization, going back to the days of David Wilentz, anoints who runs on the Democratic ticket. So why am I saying that? The reason that I'm saying that is when a woman ran on the Democratic ticket against Governor Christie, many of the leaders and many of the patriarchs of the Democratic Party did not support her. Could you comment on that? A woman was running for governor against Christie, and many Democratic leaders did not support her.
I think part of that was Governor Christie went into that, as the election was approaching, he was incredibly popular.
Right.
And the assumption was he was going to be very vulnerable, but I don't know more than that.
Well, I think the other thing there,
He's not going to be
too,
very vulnerable.
is that someone mentioned a name before a few minutes ago, but there was a kind of an alliance there. I mean, Christie and, the South Jersey folks got along, and so there was, I think, this tacit understanding that you're not going to do much to help Barbara Buono, and she did. I think the Democrats really did a great disservice to her because she really didn't get. She didn't get monetary support, and she didn't get other kind of support. And, would Christie have won anyway? I mean, I probably would have been a landslide anyway, but certainly for a blue state, that was, that was, as a woman, I can say I was not happy seeing that.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, please.
I wonder if there was in progressive, liberal, blue state New Jersey, if there was a bit of good old boyism at stake.
A bit?
Yeah, and I'm trying to be kind about it. I still think in this country that there's a segment of the population, some women, but mostly men, who have a difficult time voting for women. I just do. And it's just, I don't think it's hidden at all. I think it's really, really obvious. And I just think that there's a segment of this population that just has a problem voting for women in office. I just do.
Well, maybe we can hear some more about that from Kopp in a moment, but let me say that part of the problem with Barbara Buono was that she was not well-liked in the legislature by her own party and by the other party. She was a very strong, forceful woman, and that can be a problem for a lot of people, going to what Michael just said. But there are strong, forceful women who do it in a way that allows them to bring people together and get things done, and there are those who do it in a way that pushes everyone away, and I fear that that was part of what happened with Barbara Buono. So, in the end, people are looking for somebody they're comfortable with, whether it's a man or a woman, whatever kind of man or woman. They're looking for someone that they can see something of what they want in the hopes and dreams of the person who's running. And if that person is strident and puts you off, you're not going to be able to see through and see those things.
Somebody's over here.
Oh,
Hello, my name is Bernice Venable. I'm on leave from the Greater New Brunswick League of Women Voters chapter. I am, and there's quite a few of them in the audience. I was hoping to hear from more of the young people because I'm not young. But I have to first say, Senator Allen, you should be in Kentucky. You have quite a barometer on people's skills and knowing why people do what they do, and you need to be commended for that, because I think the same kinds of things that happened in Kentucky regarding that gubernatorial election, we can think about what happens here when people in their heart understand people and know people. They know what to do when they go to the polls. Now, I have two questions. First of all, going back to the mail-in ballot and the impact on this election and probably others. But beyond that, and for the young people here, New Jersey is not one of the 21 states that has the same day registration and voting. That has an impact on those states and the elections. I'm wondering if any of you can comment on what could happen in New Jersey down the line. In addition to that, before I take my seat, I hope you'll say something about issues that are coming up, particularly transportation, electric cars, and what the state is planning to do going forward. And in my own county, which is Middlesex, we're going to have eventually the first, I think, train station on Route 1. So all of this will impact the younger generations to come. So hopefully you can comment on those.
So there are other measures pending to further enhance the vote in New Jersey. I would be surprised if they don't move forward. I mean, those are the kind of things that I think the powers that be in the Democratic Party, at least, which is in control, can agree with, as well as, depending on the specific Republicans as well. Same-day voting is one of those. There is a proposal to do like New York. I'm not sure how soon that might come, but this ranked choice voting where you pick, this is my choice 1, choice 2, choice 3, so that you don't, as I think John said before, you don't feel like you're wasting your vote. So that's something else that might be coming in. Murphy said that he was very supportive of enhancing voting options, and I don't see why those won't go forward. One thing we haven't mentioned yet is what we are about to start is the good old lame duck session of the legislature, which is what happens between the election and the start of the new term. And lots of fun shenanigans always happen in a lame duck, so who knows what may come up.
Sometimes good policy, too.
Sometimes.
Occasionally.
With respect to, liberalization of voting rights, including vote by mail and other things that are being proposed, in general, the Democratic Party supports those because the more people that vote, their chances of success are greater. Bigger turnouts favor Democrats in general. More people can vote. I'm speaking nationally. The Republican Party nationally, tries to create requirements for voting, and specifically to suppress, racial and ethnic groups from getting to the polls. I mean, that's a fact. So
I'm not sure that I agree with it as a fact.
Nationally, I mean,
I think some of it is true, but I have to say there are those Republicans who say that they want to make sure that the voting is safe, and they're not thinking at all about trying to depress vote, but they're thinking about making sure that the vote is more accurate. There are people doing the wrong thing, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that using a broad brush like that would.
I stand by the broad brush. There's no question in my mind that the Republican Party, as a matter of policy, has been trying to restrict voting in the United States of America for the last 50 years, since they became the party of intolerance, which is a fact. So so vote by mail is promoted by the Democratic Party. And, and all of these forms of voting that are not really controllable, which gives politicians nightmares, by the way. Political professionals, they like to control the voting and know where it's coming from. And the idea that people can vote from their homes or very easily vote by mail, is not as quantifiable. But it is inevitable. It is inevitable. Many democracies in this world are largely vote by mail. In Hoboken, where I'm from, every year, thousands of more people are voting by mail. I think the day will come where going to the polling booth in a place like Hoboken, will not be necessary. Like, why bother? So they just vote by mail because these people are going to work in New York City. They're, up at 5:30 in the morning, getting out, getting their kids to school. So, it's easy forms of voting are inevitable, but there will be political pushback from certain groups to control it and limit it.
It's interesting with vote by mail and, the fact that some races from yesterday aren't called yet, and in the 2nd Assembly District, it must be unsettling to the candidates and their families. To the rest of us, it doesn't really matter, if we learn a week or two from now who's going to be representing the 2nd District in the Assembly. If you think about that, a year from now, we may all be more pressed to want to know the outcome of the race and be less calm about the idea of saying, oh, let's just wait a couple of weeks. And we'll find out. One more question, I guess, and then I have a question.
That's admittedly hard to follow. Hi, I'm Kyler Deneen from Old Bridge. I had a question. The panel touched on this a tiny bit. Thank you all for being here. The idea of, we've seen this up and down the state, but especially in the central Jersey area, strongholds being flipped more, I think, or trying to be flipped more in the past 2 or 3 election seasons than perhaps 10 or 15 years ago. Is there a reason why we're starting to see more of this sort of infiltration? Is it sort of echoing sentiment from, national politics, or is it something else?
What do you mean?
Yeah, what do you mean?
Well, when we look at Hamilton, or we look at even in my town of Old Bridge or Sayreville, or even just Somerset County, we're starting to see more of a focus as opposed to just the assembly races. We're starting to see, I think, in the past few years, more of a focus on the municipal races. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You mean sort of the notion that politics is getting nationalized, that state parties are paying attention to local races and caring whether there's a Democratic sheriff or a Republican sheriff? Is that your question?
I feel like more strongholds are trying to be flipped in the past 2 or 3 years than they were like 10 or 15 years ago.
You mean, but what do you mean by flipped?
Well, I see that there are more, well, I can speak in my own town, Old
Right.
Bridge, which has been a Republican
Right.
stronghold for very many years. We just had yesterday the closest Democratic race that there's been, we've just had in my town the closest Democratic race that we've had for a decade and a half. I know in Monroe it was also very close. Hamilton, although there was some controversy going on in Hamilton, which is also a Republican stronghold, now Democratic mayor has been elected. And it seems to be just in these past couple of years that this is really starting to take hold on a very local level. And I was wondering if there was any
More Democrats are moving in.
Right, yeah,
And,
definitely.
and there's still, I look at the 8th district, that used to be a significant Republican stronghold in terms of the numbers of voters registered in each party. I don't have at tip of my tongue the numbers now, but I know that there's a significant amount more Democrats in the 8th district, and yet the Republicans won. How long they can hold it, I don't know. But we're just seeing that across the state.
And I do think that, we'll be able to tell in a few years once the Trump factor is gone. I live in Hunterdon County, and in my little town, which is a Republican town, we have a Democratic mayor elected last year, and Tammy Murphy came in to campaign for her. I think that the Democrats in certain strongholds where, and this is stereotyping, but the demographic of the higher educated or the wealthier Republican who maybe does not support or did not support Trump, thinking that, okay, we're going to try to get those people and, get them to vote Democratic just because there's still that anger. I think that that's been playing into it in some places. Now, whether that will continue down the road, once this is all, that national part has faded, it's going to be anybody's guess.
I want to ask one final question directed to the two former state senators. When you greeted each other this morning, I gather you hadn't seen each other in a long time, and one of you asked whether you miss being in the legislature, and I think you said yes and you said no. And you were each there for, I guess, 15 to 20 years for you, and 50. And I wonder what your thinking is about having been in elected office and why you do or don't miss it now.
Well, I'm still involved. I run a PAC. We backed Democrat and Republican women who are running for the legislature. Unfortunately, only 25% of our women won, but that's okay. At least we're backing some. I'm also on a PAC that I'm the director of a super PAC for a congressional candidate. I'm very involved in a lot of different things when it comes to, I'm a visiting associate here at the Eagleton, which I love. I was teaching up here on Monday. So I'm doing a lot of things that are involved, and it's more the kinds of things that I feel that I can use my knowledge on, and I'm really pleased about that. The day-to-day thing that goes on in the legislature for me became very, very tough. And because I ran as a Republican in a almost 3-to-1 Democratic district, my races were always really, really nuts. So to take an entire year and run a campaign instead of being able to look at policy, for me that was just a waste of time and effort, and I had just had enough of it. So it's a very individualized idea for me, but I'm very happy where I am.
Diane and I served together. We overlapped, and she was one of the finest senators in the state Senate. Although we're from different parties, I've always respected her, and I was really happy to see her here today. She was excellent at what she does, and she continues to contribute to the political process. I love politics. I love my country. And I have great respect for people who have the courage to run for office and to serve. I have great respect for people who do that, regardless of their party, regardless of their positions on issues, even regardless of their personalities. When you go into the public arena, I don't question your motives. It's a great honor. To go into that arena and to stand for election. And, last night I was, a friend of somebody who was running. Unfortunately, she won. But, I stood there, when the results came in. And there's no feeling like 8:01 on election night when the numbers start coming in and your heart is in your throat. And, it's like it's extraordinary thing that people put themselves through to serve. So that's how I feel about democracy and people, in office. And, I love my time in active political office, which I was in for about 25 years. And, I do miss it, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed every part of it. And with that, I'll say I was very happy to be here today to talk about it.
You should run again.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for being here. The panel was a great panel.
Great fun.
And just to remind you, if you haven't marked it in your calendars yet, the New Jersey primary is June 2nd, 2020. So we'll gather here on the morning of June 3rd. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.